We'll start with the Nokar mantra. Om Namo Arihantanam. Om Namo Siddhanam. Om Namo Ayariyanam. Om Namo Ajayanam. Namo Loe Savasahunam. Eso Panchanamokaro. Sarva Pavapanasano. Mangalalam cha Sarvesim. Paramam Havai Mangalam. Paramam Havai Mangalam. Thank you for coming to today's discussion. And last class we talked about emotions, and I handed out a spreadsheet. I kind of tried to stuff a lot in there, which is why we went overtime. And so I handed out a spreadsheet that has generated some interest. These are just the leftover ones I had from last class. And so I thought I would take a deeper dive into that. That is, we all know that Jane comes from the word Jina, which means conqueror. What are we conquering? We're conquering our passions or desires, specifically Krodh, Man, Maya, Lobh, which is anger, ego, deceit, and greed. Now, today I'd like to maybe put a little bit of that theory aside and discuss ways in which we gain power by defeating our emotions. When we discussed it last class, I'm sure that some of you thought it was a little abstract. Well, we're supposed to do it because we're performing samvar, which is the balking of karma, and nirjara, which is the burning of karma that's already bound to our soul. And by harnessing my emotions, somehow, some way, my life will be better, theoretically, in the future, right? And that's true. That's the most important thing. But today, we're going to discuss the things of lesser importance, but more immediacy. That is, if we put Jainism aside, Dimmer, you're telling me that my life will be better right now if I get rid of anger, ego, deceit, and greed. And I'm telling you yes. And today we're going to discuss why and how. So first up is anger. And before we get to that, let's get a little bit of a refresher. So does anybody remember the cause of anger? Yourself. That's good. But let's say you get angry, right? What is the cause of that anger?
It's the expectation gap.
Exactly.
You are uncertain of something and you try to speak before you think that's correct.
Right. So anger is caused by a divergence between expectation and reality. Does everybody believe that?
Yeah.
Can anybody think of some scenario in which you get angry where that's not the case?
Basically, it's the expectation gap, right? You expected something, it didn't happen.
And you got angry because of it. Okay. So because that's the real cause of anger, and expectations are subjective, right? It's only what's happening in your mind. The corollary is that all anger is directed at yourself. Okay? So can anybody give me a counterpoint? When is some time that you've been angry that you were not angry at yourself? That you were angry at some other person? Hey, come on in. So today we are talking a little bit deeper into how getting rid of these emotions will better our life. So does everybody believe that all anger is directed at yourself? Do you believe that? Or do you believe there's some justified scenario where you're actually angry at somebody else or something else?
Somebody else. What do you mean by justified?
I'm telling you,
I think you can get angry at somebody else.
Okay.
Right? Because
And-
they didn't meet I mean, right? I mean, if they didn't perform the way they were supposed to perform or do something they were supposed to do, you're not angry at yourself, you're angry at them.
Our anger, I believe, triggers when something is going on with you. Then, if you are in a good mood and someone does wrong, you can always forget and move on. Means you don't get angry at that moment in time. But if you are upset or something is happening, then you will immediately angry. Otherwise, you can just ignore and you can move on. I believe so. It's always it starts from within.
Okay. Okay, that's great. So I was expecting a lot of pushback because sometimes this is controversial, not a lot of people believe it. But all anger is directed at yourself. So the reason you can't think of a scenario where anger is not directed at yourself is because of the subjective part. Because I'm asking you to prove that the reality should conform to your expectations, which is impossible. Okay? Reality can never conform to your expectations. Your expectations must always conform to reality. And that is why all anger is directed at yourself. So now let's move on to the main course, now that we had that refresher on anger. So in what immediate ways will your life benefit right now? The most important is samvar and nirjara and karma and all that, but we're leaving that aside this week. And we're talking about what ways will your life get better right now if you redirect, negate, or prevent your anger.
You can take informed decisions. If you're not angry, you are in a much better state
Right.
to take the right decisions.
So your anger clouds your judgment.
Yeah,
And it makes
yeah,
you,
most of the time, yes.
It makes your decisions somewhat work against your self-interest.
Yeah, at that
because of
point
that
in time,
cloudiness.
when you're angry, that time you don't realize. But then once you cool down, then you probably start thinking that, okay, maybe I didn't do the right thing.
Right.
When you are angry, it means you are not thinking straight.
Right.
I think being angry can also trigger ego.
That's right. So a lot of these dovetail into each other.
Yeah.
So one way is that if you negate your anger, then people won't be able to control or manipulate you to do things against your self-interest. Politicians manipulate your anger to get their agenda done, not your agenda done. Okay? We all know people that vote a certain way, vote against their self-interest because they believe their stance on issues is a certain way that goes against their own self-interest, right? Newspapers use your anger to make money, right? We've all seen these clickbait headlines that have almost nothing to do with the article, but you clicked on it and you viewed the ad and they got money from you. Okay, that's against your self-interest. Okay, women will test you and pit you against other men for their interest, not your own interest, right? And men will, if they know you're easy to anger, they'll goad you into using violence, such that, for example, using their words, but then you make it physical so that you're the aggressor. And when the police come in, you're the aggressor, right? So these are the ways. So if you negate your anger, you won't be mad at politics anymore. Okay? You won't be mad at the news anymore. You won't be constantly scrolling your Facebook, looking at the news, looking for the next thing to be angry. You kind of be above all that, right? You won't let other people manipulate you for their agendas, and you'll follow your own agenda if you can figure out what that is. Sometimes that's the hardest part. It's figuring out what you want to do. So we talked about a little bit last week. The best way to redirect your anger is exercise, physical exercise, because that will dissipate your anger. That comes with many immediate benefits, right? Makes you more attractive, makes you more confident, makes you more healthy, makes you more social, and so on, right? So if you can redirect your anger into exercise, that's an immediate benefit you can get right now. And this is not some theoretical, I'm performing some good thing for my soul because I'm going to be reborn, something like this. It's not that. It's right now, right here, which is what we're talking about today. So when you negate anger by practicing forgiveness, Who can tell me what forgiveness will do for you if you practice that in your life?
Bring peace to your life.
Mm-hmm. How is that?
Yes. Because you will see positive in all the situation then.
Right.
Instead of finding that nigger getting angry, agitated, so you will be calm always that okay, this happened, let me tackle that in this way rather than getting angry.
Right.
And you will manage the work better.
Right. Exactly.
Helps you move on.
Correct. So forgiveness is letting go of that, right? And remember, if anger is directed at yourself, if I forgive you, I'm actually forgiving myself. Okay? I am allowing myself to let go of that and move beyond that. And that brings up an interesting thing about the past. We talk about moving on, for example, and getting closure and things like that. But once you're able to think critically, is remembering anything about the past worthwhile? Is remembering, aside from, I'd like to give, I don't know, so I'd like your input. I'd like you to give me an example. I'm not talking about knowledge like I know what to do or what the name of things are. And I'm not talking about safety, I know how to be safe because I remember those things. I'm talking about specific experiences about your life. What is that worth? What impact does it have on your actions now or on your future? Is it even worth using up space in your brain to know that?
Good or bad, right?
Right.
You want to remember the good stuff, or you're saying no?
Yeah, why? It'll just make you unhappy.
Good stuff.
But
remember,
sometimes, yeah, so
good stuff you want to remember.
Okay.
It brings up joyful memories. Right? Hey, we had a good time at this place or that place or this
Right.
event. Negative things, yeah, doesn't help you forgive and forget.
Mm-hmm.
So that is stuff you should be able to.
So you want to hang on to good memories. Is it because you relive them and you're happy in that moment when you relive them, when you're thinking about it?
Well, I don't just not. It's just not about reliving it versus it brings a good sense, right? Good feelings.
Feelings.
Yeah, your mood is better.
Right.
You behave better.
Right.
You're calm. You make better.
So you're
decisions.
saying it's worth it because it makes my mood better right now, and that's why it has an immediate impact on my life. Because I remember the good times.
It's just like good things make you want to do better things, right? So if I say to my family, "Hey, remember that time we went to San Antonio? We're gonna go and
Right.
go back again." Like they all get excited. I'm passing good vibes. Everyone's in a good mood, good spirit. Everyone's doing good stuff.
Right. Okay.
Now the minute I tell them we're not going, then I'm punishing them, right? Hey, remember that good time? Well, we're not going again.
Right.
But
Yeah, see, for me, it's the past experiences make me remember. Life gets in the way, right? Everything happens, work, other stuff that come up. When you think of those memories, you remember what's important.
Right.
It's what you valued the most. So it remembers your values. I mean, for me at least, when I go through pictures of my kids or with family, it's okay. These are the things that are important to me. Let me refocus
Right.
on spending more time with them or doing these things rather than worrying about other stuff that's immediate in my life right now. So that's the
good.
way I look at it.
Yeah, that's very good. I think that's very good. So let's see. Now let's talk about preventing anger. When you prevent your anger, you're better at practicing mindfulness, which I've harped on forever. And you're better able to move your mind in the directions of your goals, which we talked about. Anger clouds your mind. So comments on that before we move on to the next. Before we move on to ego. So comments or questions about. So I have a question. So the thing that's hard is it's easy for us to talk about it here, and it's hard for us to remember it out there. So Umesh, when was the last time you got angry?
That's morning.
Almost every day.
Right?
You don't know in the
So how can we do that, right? So we know things, right, but we don't practice them. So how can we get it out of these four walls and get it? What can we do to get it into our life? Because we know it's supposed to. There's a lot of things like that. We know we're supposed to eat right and exercise, right? We know we're supposed to not get angry, right? We know we're supposed to do certain things, and we know I guess we know in our head, like, I know I'm supposed to meditate and it's going to make my life better. But I don't do that, right? So how can we start?
Have no expectations.
Uh-huh.
If you have no expectations, then you just forget.
Right.
Move on.
Right. So when was the last time you got angry?
Yesterday, I'm sure, or something.
Yesterday? Okay, so what were the expectations that caused you to get angry?
So, I'm coaching my basketball. Sunday, he actually shot a wrong goal. So we practice several times, and he sits there and does the wrong thing. So
Yeah.
you get excited.
Yeah, definitely. Because you're like, well, I told you, or like, how hard is it to forget to remember which goal you're shooting on?
Well, the
Like
worst
I
thing
told
is
you twice.
The worst thing is they did it twice yesterday.
Right.
So after you tell him once, he did it again. So
So you had an expectation that your son had a certain level of care about the game that you do, and he did it.
Yeah.
And you got angry because of it, right? So we shouldn't. So there is kind of some point where we should intercept that, right? When we should realize that, right? So how do we get it from out of here? How could you have realized that before you got angry? You knew what to do, and you knew why it was wrong. But how could you have taken the action to intercept that anger at that time?
Someone else. I think.
So the answer is always mindfulness. Look at the bottom of that spreadsheet. It's always mindfulness, 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 right? It's always you have a kind of meta-awareness of what your brain is doing. And it is hard. Because I am asking you to live another life in parallel to the life you're currently living. Okay? So it's like driving a car, okay? I cannot, with mindfulness, right? I can't teach you about the brake, and I can't teach you about the steering wheel, and I can't teach you about the gas all separately and expect you to, and then, okay, I taught you those three things, and now you know how to drive a car. No, I can't do that. I have to teach you about using them together. And you have to start using everything together all at once. You can't just learn about the brake and just, let go of the steering wheel and don't worry about the gas and just practice the braking, right? So that's why mindfulness, the difficulty curve is like this, right? So it's like this. So it's hardest at the beginning. Okay, so I don't know what your experience is with mindfulness, but we can bring it up again as a topic. We talked about it a bunch last year. But when you have that mindfulness, when you realize, when you have that metacognition of, oh, I'm getting hot right now, I wonder why, or let me analyze why, or isn't it so interesting I let it take over my life, or then you realize, oh, wow, that's how you intercept it, is mindfulness. And there's only the one answer. It's in order to get it from out of here into your life, that's kind of the best answer I have for you. And that's why at the bottom of that spreadsheet, all it says is mindfulness, right? Because that's the only way to do it. So any comments or questions before we move on to ego?
I think
Yeah.
I just want to bring a parallel to what I've learned in one of the other sessions in my son's school.
Uh-huh.
This was a session about parenting. So I'm sure most of us get angry most of the time because of kids, because you
Yeah.
lose it at that second, right?
Yeah.
You keep telling them, you tell politely. The first few times you tell
Yeah.
very politely, you are very calm. That time you shouldn't get angry. But then he will be doing what he wants to do, and he'll not at all focus on whatever you're saying. Then you raise your pitch, then he will see, oh, now dad is getting angry. I don't know, they get some kind of a joy seeing their parents getting angry. Then
Sure.
they'll keep testing that. And then again you raise your pitch further, then you start shouting, right?
Right.
So in this session, that lady told us that, you know what, treat your kids as if there's a buffalo saying something.
Mm-hmm.
Or you just imagine some character, okay, and then you don't react, because the moment you treat your sons as adults because they are kids. They will be kids.
Yeah.
No matter how many times you tell them, they are going to do the same thing again and again, again and again. It's not that you let them do what they have to do, but just that you have to sometimes, just drink it through. I mean, you don't react. And you see the difference. If you don't react, he will start thinking that, why is dad not reacting?
Yeah.
No, because he's manipulating you, right? That's how I relate back to what we just did this morning. So the best way is to just think, if some, for example, he's just telling that he wants something, and you don't want to give that, then he will keep yelling, and then you think, okay, there's a donkey, or just imagine any character, then you'll be fine, you'll not react.
Right.
So that, I think, at the end of the day, it's mindfulness, because you know that he is a kid, he's 7-year-old or 5-year-old, and you cannot expect him to be like you. And
Right.
that is the expectation part, right?
Yeah.
Because you start expecting that because I've given the instructions, be it basketball or be it any other game, or be it doing the daily chores in life, or being silent at home when you're doing something important, they just will listen.
Yeah.
So I think it's about trying to imagine something, and if we start practicing that, that is much more easier than just saying be mindfulness, right?
Yeah.
Because you then relate, okay, I know he's not an adult, and to expect being a 30 or 35-year-old, you cannot.
Yeah.
So
that's like a shortcut to mindfulness.
Yeah,
right?
shortcut,
Instead of going through the mental process of, oh, I'm getting angry, oh, he's a kid, I should understand there's an expectation gap or whatever. It's like, oh, he's like a cartoon character. Like, wah, 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 wah. That's the nature of kids, right? You know?
Well,
That's great.
I have a problem with that one. So the kid will go to school and they put their stuff up properly. When they come home, they won't. And I'm like, what's the difference?
Yeah.
Well, there's a difference.
So I blow my top there because I'm trying to be mindful, but I'm like, you're doing it at school. You come home and this.
Yeah.
If I don't say anything, then they'll continue abusing that. Oh, nobody cares. Let's just keep doing what we have to do.
And it makes us angry because they know how to behave. You know, because they do it at school.
Yeah.
Right. And that's what makes me and my wife angry, is that they will behave for the grandparents. They'll act completely different for the grandparents than they will with us. And then if we talk about how, like, oh, they're misbehaving, they're like, oh no, they think my parents think something's wrong with us. Oh no, she's a great kid. What are you talking about? We never have that problem or whatever. We actually behave differently with you, right? So yeah, we have that same deal. So if we practice this mindfulness, then hopefully that'll get us there together. So let's go on to ego, okay? So that's great. I'm loving that we're talking about our life. And so in what ways will your life be better if you redirect, negate, or prevent ego? Okay, I can start with one. More family, friends, and acquaintances will want you in their lives rather than cutting you out of their lives. This actually applies to all four: anger, ego, deceit, and greed. If you show a lot of these, people will start cutting you out of their life. And, if we, leave Jainism aside for a second, well, we don't want that to happen, right? So that's a good way. So how about you? In what ways will your life be better if you practice humility, or if you prevent yourself from boasting, or if you prevent yourself from thinking too highly about yourself?
if you don't do that, you are grounded.
Mm-hmm.
You know that you are straightforward, and then in your conversations that comes through very, very clearly, and the other person starts. I'm not saying that we should do that because the other person is judging you, but just
Right.
that it comes very naturally. If you are having that kind of a egoistic or boasting character, then people generally will cut you out of the group. Yeah.
Right. So I'll give you an example. Let's say you're doing something physical, like let's say you're going skiing, and you have an ego about it, right? You overestimate your physical abilities, You say, oh no, it's only been a year since I did. I can do a black diamond slope. And you do it, and you injure yourself. Well, if you had not had that ego if you had, accurately judged your abilities, you wouldn't have injured yourself. And that is one immediate way that not having an ego will make your life better. It'll prevent you from injuring yourself.
Yeah, there's a thin line between confidence and overconfidence. So here in this case, it is overconfidence, right? That it's been a year, but still I can go ahead and do that part.
And the line is reality. Confidence is what is reality, the reality of your abilities. And overconfidence is you're mistaking the reality for your expectation. Right? And that's the line between confidence and reality, right? Or confidence and overconfidence. So how about overestimating your mental abilities? If you have an ego about, let's say, how much responsibility you take on at work, and you say, oh yeah, I can be in charge of that project, I can get it done for you by this date. And you don't, and it's a mess, and your professional life takes a hit, right? That's an immediate way that preventing, negating, or redirecting your ego will benefit your life. Is that just like with overestimation of your physical abilities, an overestimation of your mental abilities will prevent you from that reputational damage. Or it could be even worse than that, like if you're in charge of a project and you're like, if you're an engineer and you're like, yeah, I did these calculations right, and somebody's safety is compromised. That's not your own safety, that will get you fired, right? So accurately judging your abilities, aka preventing your ego from taking over, will immediately help you in your life. And of course, to remember, the most important thing is that, well, we do it to block karmas and we do it to get rid of karmas, but that's not what we're talking about today. So comments and questions about that. Ego.
I think it helps you be more successful too, in terms of if you're a professional that's managing a team, or if you're playing a sport where you work in a team environment, you have teammates. I think people will work harder, work better if you don't have that ego, which in turn translates to your success. Right. So.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point.
When you have an ego, means you are always be a part of a subset rather than a full set.
Mm-hmm.
Because you are limited to that ego and you are always within the boundary of that ego. Sorry about that. Instead of being in the full set, you will be limited. So it's always better to stay away from that.
Right. So it looks like a lot of you are nodding in agreement. So a lot of we know what to do, but how do we get it out of here, these four walls, and into our life?
Mindfulness.
Exactly, mindfulness. Perfect. So moving on to deceit.
Yeah.
In what ways will your life be better if you redirect, negate, or prevent deceit? Your life be better right now. Like, if you stop it right now, in what ways will your life improve?
Well, you won't cause anger against somebody else, right? Somebody finds out you've deceived them, then they're angry towards you, and you're definitely probably gonna have some kind of anger.
Right, and that's good for us, because if more people that are angry at us, the worse our life is. Yeah.
I guess one doesn't live in fear then, knowing that
Exactly.
they're deceived.
Right. So when you lie a lot, you have to keep your story straight, right? To the different people you lied to. And if you lied to the cops, like you're always like looking over your shoulder, or if you're doing things illegally, right? You're always like looking over your shoulder and afraid to live your life, right? So that's one way. I don't have to spend as much time thinking about who I told which lie to if I practice truthfulness.
Yeah, to the point that we discussed earlier, you will have to remember that, keep that memory in you when you are talking lie every time.
Right.
So what did I say? Okay, let me follow that. So, but if you are telling truth from the beginning, then you can erase that memory and concentrate on the topic going on.
Right. So when you don't practice deceitfulness, you'll seem congruent by others. By which I mean, your words will comport with your actions, and we automatically know that in people, even if we don't know those words. We sense that in people, like, oh, I can trust him when he says something. That's true, and so you rise in their esteem. So now we don't really care about that in Jainism, but what we're talking about today is our life right now, right? And so it's always good if you rise in other people's esteem. It's good for your own life. So how do we take that out of here and into our life? Because we all can talk until the cows come home about, oh, I'm not going to lie, or oh, this is a little bit harder one. Okay, so when's the last time you lied?
I'm sure inadvertently I must have.
How about advertently?
I don't know.
No? Okay. You know what? The last time I lied, it was a couple hours ago. My kid was sick, and she drank like half her medicine and didn't want to drink the rest because it tasted bad. And so it was like 2 o'clock in the morning. And so she was like, oh, I want water. And I said, okay. And then I kind of put the medicine cup, it was dark, the lights were out, we were in her room, right? So I put the medicine cup in the water cup, and I put the straw in the medicine cup, and I said, here's your water. And she drank the rest, and she got mad at me. Okay? So then I let her have her water. But that's the last time I lied. So, was that right or wrong?
For little things, it will be good.
That's a tough one.
What did you say?
I
Half
said
wrong?
that's a tough one because I lie to my kids too, but I do it thinking that it's good for them, right?
Right.
So because
What's a lie that you tell your kids?
if they don't finish their food, they're gonna, or if they jump off the couch, or if they do something naughty, they're gonna bust their head open, or we're gonna have to go to the hospital or stuff
Right.
like that. Because I want them to stop.
Right.
Right? Or if you scream
There's
too
a-
loud, you're gonna lose your voice, right? I mean, it's
Yeah.
somewhat true, but at the end of the day, it's not gonna happen.
It's a low probability
Yeah.
event.
That's right.
So you're increasing you're focusing on the low probability
Right.
event.
Right.
Which is that's a lie.
Yeah.
So they're not going to break their legs if they play on the couch.
Exactly.
Yeah. So is it wrong? This is what we got to talk about, guys. This is Dad's class. Is it wrong or not wrong? There's no right answer. You tell me what you think.
It's partially right.
It's never right. It's never right.
I think it's wrong. Yeah.
Okay. What is the right way? So if your kid's jumping on the couch and you don't want them to do that, well, what's the right way to go about it?
I don't know.
Don't know. That's fine. You don't have to know all the answers. That's why we're here. Hopefully we can learn from each other.
Maybe give an example if you know about a situation or somebody was doing that and fell
Or
or
jump. Show a live demo, jump and fall down.
See, the reason I say it's partially right because there is a possibility that can happen, right?
Right.
That person or kid can break the leg.
Sure. Yeah.
So either show them some extreme pictures of somebody getting
Right.
hurt. It is still the same. We are showing them what we are telling them.
Right.
Not all the time it can happen, and they already know that, right? Because this is not the first time they did with this part.
Right.
So when I say partially right, it is a possibility that it can happen. No problem.
Right. And this is important to talk about, guys, because I feel like a lot of these are for my kids, all right? Because I feel like if I didn't have the kids, I wouldn't get angry, at all almost, okay? That's a major source of my anger, right, is my kids. Because I take the consequences of their actions, which I somehow feel is unfair. They throw up and they're not going to clean it up. I have to clean it up, Who did the action and who faces the consequences? It's all mismatch, right? So that's where my anger comes from. And so this is important for us to talk about because, I feel like I could get a really great start at all this stuff if it wasn't for my kids. So we have to talk about that. So any other ways your life will be better if you redirect, negate, or prevent your deceit?
I guess stop giving carrots in terms of to your kids or anybody else that hey, if you do this you'll get that, and then
Bribery, right?
Bribery,
Yeah,
you
that's
get
If you use the potty, I'll give you an M&M.
Right.
yeah.
That's right.
It's wrong. you should use a potty because it's right to use the potty. It's the right thing to do. Yeah. If you don't eat your broccoli, you won't get dessert. Well, you should eat your broccoli because it's the right thing to do,
Right.
independent of whether you get dessert or not.
Or the corollary is you write every time you drive and then you follow up on it and see how hard it is.
Okay, so let's move on to greed. Okay? So in what ways will your life be better right now if you redirect, negate, or prevent your greed?
There is saying in Gujarati, right? Ati lobh te paapnu mood છે.
What does that mean?
Means more you are greedy, means you'll do the wrong things or means
Right,
That is the root of the scenes you create.
sins.
right, right. And that's why this is one of the hardest ones to get rid of. But in what ways, but let's say you got rid of your greed, how would your life improve?
More content.
Yeah, you're more at peace.
Peace.
You'll be
Happiness.
satisfied.
Right. You'd be satisfied. So the lesser threshold of satisfaction you have in all aspects of your life, the more satisfied you'll be.
You're not lessening your threshold.
Oh yeah. By eliminating your greed, you're lessening you're happy with less. You're happy with less money. You're happy with less food. You're happy with less women.
What
You're happy
you
with
have,
less.
you will be happy with what you have, rather than less or more, but you will be happy with what you have.
Right. Right. And that does what? That frees up time for you to pursue your own agenda. And your own agenda is samvara and nirjara, blocking your karma and getting rid of your karma. Right? So
That's the key point. Sorry to interject.
no problem.
I guess, like we at work or in general, we say, okay, have a mission, have a vision. I think we never start with that in terms of, okay, this is my vision or mission to be at peace,
Right.
practice nirjara, and that's why all these other things start playing in one's life.
That's right. So if you're not manipulating yourself, then somebody else is manipulating you. Okay? So if you don't have a goal of what you want to do in your life, and let's not talk about Jainism, just in anything, okay? Then that means you're more likely to be, manipulated by Facebook or Netflix or reading or, oh, I have to do this for other people, or I have to go to this place, or this guy asked me to do this thing. Well, I'm not doing anything else, so why don't I do that, right? So that's the key. And sometimes that's the hardest part, is figuring out what you want. Figuring out what you want out of your life. It's so much easier to make decisions if you have the goal in mind, right? If you don't have a goal in mind, then what does it matter what decisions you make? This is like that Disney movie, right? Where Alice is saying, well, how do I get out of here? And the cat says, where do you want to go? And Alice says, oh no, I don't want to go anywhere. Then the cat says, well, it doesn't matter which direction you go in, right? So if you don't have that kind of mission in your life, so maybe that's something to think about. Maybe on your drive home, think about, well, what do you want out of this life? What did I start? It's so easy for us to get caught up in the day-to-day and not look at the long term.
That's where it starts, though. You said you want something in life.
Right. What do you want?
What if you don't want any expectation? I don't want anything.
You want samvara and nirjara in your life.
I let life give what it gives me.
Right?
If I strive towards those, yes, those are good things, but
Right.
But see, that's your expectation. You're striving for, you're expecting the good things to happen.
no, I'm not expecting anything. I live a day-to-day life, whatever needs to happen to produce, get the end result.
Whatever.
Sorry, no end result. But
So you just
Hopefully-
take life as it comes,
yes,
right?
yes.
But then it's much harder to make decisions in your life. If you take life as it comes, sometimes, you have to make a decision between A and B, or A and B and C, right? Then it's much harder to do that. And if you don't make those decisions, then somebody else makes those decisions for you. And we're saying that's bad, because this life is so precious that to be born in a human form, you have so much of a chance to do nirjara, which is the burning of karma. Other animals and plants don't have that opportunity because they don't have the cognition that humans have. And so that means if you're taking life as it comes, then you're wasting that opportunity. So let's see. It sounds easy, but it's actually kind of more profound than it sounds, in that the more you have, the less you enjoy. The more you have, the less you enjoy. Does anybody agree with that? Does anybody disagree with that?
Everything in excess is always bad for you, but what's the definition of more you have is? What is more? Anything in excess, like you eat sugar in excess, but in a limited quantity, it's better for you. But if you eat in excess, you will have diabetes or something.
Right.
So, but what defines what is more?
So I'll give you an example. So if you go to the store and you're buying something, let's say you're buying some jeans, and they're small, medium, and large. Then you just pick one, and then you buy it and you go. And if it's a little too big, you put on a belt. And if it's a little too small, you suck in your stomach a little bit. And that's it. Those are the only choices you have: small, medium, and large. But then let's say you go into the store, and there's like this wall of jeans, and it's like arranged by size. Well, then you're like, I tried a 36, okay, but it was a little too tight. And then I tried a 38, but it was a little too loose. And they don't have a 37. And so you kind of look around for a 37. And then you try to find the right length, and you're like, well, I don't have the right length, or I don't, What happens is the store is transferring the fault onto you. So when you go to the store, and if there's a small, medium, large, and you get the large, and you got to put on a belt, that's a store's fault, right? But when there's everything, then it's your fault. If the jeans don't fit, it's your fault because you didn't spend enough time looking for the exact right pair, right? And so that's what they call the problem of choice, or that's what's sometimes called analysis paralysis.
Just building onto that example, now you put A, B, C, D, E, F, G and multiple brands.
Right, exactly.
And the cost of different brands. Now, should I buy the low cost one from Walmart, or should I buy from Macy's? Or
and how long will it last, right? Yeah. I don't know how long jeans last. Are these low cost ones going to not last a long time?
Does all these core qualities start pouring in? Oh, he's wearing that, or oh, I've greed. Now I'm making more money. I should buy a more expensive one, whether it lasts long,
right,
or it doesn't last long.
And then all of a sudden, you spent an hour at the store. In the first scenario, you spent 2 minutes at the store. In the second scenario, you spent an hour at the store. Okay, so that's kind of what this transferring of responsibility does to you, and that's why we're talking about this greed thing. Because in that same way, you can talk about money, you can talk about food, you can talk about women, you can talk about a bunch of these things. And if you're content with less, you can free up your brain cycles to do the things you want to do. So how do we go, so a lot of you are nodding in agreement, right? So how do we get it out of here and get it into our lives? Like, how do I be like, I've been here for half an hour at the store. This is not what I want to do with my life, How do I remember that? When I'm at the store, when I'm not surrounded by these people, and when I'm not at the temple, and when I'm not. So how do I remember that then? When I need it. I'm telling you these things right now. You don't need it right now.
Become a robot and program yourself. Program and then.
I guess personally for me, the guilt sets in. Okay, I'll pick up the jeans, start walking towards the checkout counter, and then suddenly think about, okay, when was the last time I told my kid, hey, you cannot buy this because of XYZ reason? And then I think about that and I'll say, okay, that's not right. Maybe I should either buy him more, or do I really need it?
Right.
And start thinking about other stuff. Okay, how many jeans do I have, and am I making use of all those jeans? And if I really want it, should I get rid of one, donate it or whatever, and then buy it? And maybe then I'll just be content. Okay, I looked at it, I know what's available. I don't need it right now. If I need it, I'll come back and then walk away.
Right.
It has happened, by the way. I'm not lying.
Specific, yeah.
True story. True story. So how did you do that? How did you remember that at that time?
Probably the guilt of do I really need it, and I know I'm spending, and I have X number of jeans already at home.
So that guilt was a shortcut to mindfulness for you.
Could be the case.
Just
right
like a
at that
cartoon
time.
character was a shortcut for mindfulness for
Yeah.
anger. So that guilt was a shortcut for mindfulness. So that's great. So maybe next class we can talk about what other shortcuts for mindfulness we can, because that's the kind of way we can practice it and the way we intercept it. But the answer is mindfulness. That's how you do it. That's how you remember if you spent more than 10 minutes at the store, you better get out of there, because you're not doing what you want to be doing. You're doing what the store wants you to be doing, because it is transferring the responsibility to you. So not only, I'm not just talking about politicians and newspapers and all that are pushing their agenda. The store's pushing their agenda on you. The advertisements are pushing their agenda on you. Once you start thinking like this and you go out there, you'll realize everyone is trying to manipulate you from doing what you don't want to do. And if you don't believe me, try this. Go home and say, give yourself a goal. Say, I want to do this. Okay? And then try to accomplish your goal. Okay? At this age, you probably won't be able to do it. If I go home, I'm like a wannabe writer, right? So if I go home and say, I want to write 3 chapters of this book in 1 month, it will not be done. You know why? Because I got to take out the trash. I got to get my kids ready for school tomorrow. I got to do this thing at the house. I got to go to this guy's place. I got to do this. I am being manipulated by the people around me, by circumstances, by everything from doing what I want to do. So you try that. I guarantee you'll fail, unfortunately. That's the bad news I have for you. But we are learning how not to fail in this class. Okay? And what's the answer? It's mindfulness. So comments or questions about that? Okay, that's all I have for you today. Thank you so much for the new people that came. Really appreciate that. Thank you for discussing. We'll do it again next week, I think.
Next
Before
week is
the
fine.
volley
The week
comes.
after is
Yeah, the week
Right.
after is the volley program.
Right. Oh, and I wanted to say, next week we're going to put that up on the wall. So bring your hammers and nails and stud finders and all that. We're going to put that thing up on the wall, and then we'll have our class.
Where
Ready?
does the second board go?
Stays there. Just one of you. Yeah. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, everybody, for coming today. I really appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jimmy.